absolutely free.
Hello everyone and welcome back yet again to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. We are coming at you yet again with another secondary player profile. This time a guy who's a little bit older, been around the league a bit, but still tends to fly under the radar. I really think that this guy defines a modern free safety in that he truly locks down the open field behind him. And that player is, of course, the very talented Jessie Bates. Now, when I think about the position free safety, I think about the meaning of the word free. Free for all, freedom, how you interpret it. It always stems down to covering that space behind you. And with that position comes great responsibility, because when you're the last line of defense, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of burden on your shoulders to make sure that you truly are the last line of defense. And with the modern NFL and the way teams are throwing the football on the field and the way they're stretching the field especially, you need a solid free safety to understand that role. And Jessie Bates is no more solid than anyone else. And so I believe that free safeties and safeties in general are such a weird position to diagnose, especially when we're talking about IDP leagues. But when it comes down to it, I would say Jessie Bates should rank at the top of the board in this department, especially when safeties are going to be very hard to come by in IDP drafts. So without further ado, let's jump right into what makes Jessie Bates such a special athlete. 675 fantasy points in his career. His best season was last year, 158.5 fantasy points his second year with the Falcons. Obviously, he made his name more known in Cincinnati, but going to a Falcons defense that's really starting to come into its own is something to behold, because I really liked what he established in Cincinnati. His physicality was really seen, and him and Eli Apple were so fun to watch together. But moving to now the Falcons, a team is trying to build a defense like they had in the middle part of the 2010s. I really think that Jessie Bates is the perfect person to go after in order to lock down a highly integral position in the secondary. Last year he had he had 4 passes defended, 3 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, and 89 solo tackles. And that just goes to show that at every single level, statistically, Jessie Bates meets the standard. Now, let's talk about the Falcons, because they are a weird team when we talk about them defensively. I think that when your best front 7 player is A.J. Terrell, it just goes to show that you haven't really found that structure that really got you to that mid-decade Super Bowl, and B, you're not really focused on building from the front anymore. I think that's kind of a shrewd decision, and I think it's going to potentially help them, but in the end, you kind of need a solid front 7 outside of just A.J. Terrell. But what I will say is that, like I said before, when teams stretch the field on you, you definitely do need solid structure in your secondary. And so the Falcons acquiring Jessie Bates a couple of years ago goes to show that, hey, they are realizing the league is evolving to a league where teams are going to become more pass happy. And as they become more pass happy, they're going to stress the verticality of their offense. Thus, having a free safety who's been one of the best in the league is required for us. And Jessie Bates fits that bill perfectly. And in a 3-4 defense, when you have those two safeties. The free safety is mainly the quarterback of that defense. He has to make sure that everything outside of himself, all in front of him, is sound so that nothing can get past them. When I look at especially the Falcons, the opportunities for them to really develop as a team are there. They play in one of the weakest divisions in the entire NFL. They don't necessarily need to put up points. And now they feel they have the offensive setup that alleviates some of the pressure on the defense. And so, when I look at this Falcons defense, yes, they may be lacking in true stars, but A.J. Terrell and Jessie Bates might just be enough. I love A.J. Terrell's lateral quickness. I love his agility. And he can do just enough to really help a Falcons front that's in kind of a retooling phase. And then on the back end, I really think Jessie Bates is going to make sure that in a limited amount of times teams throw his way, he's going to be there. And when I look at the Saints, look at the Panthers, even the Bucks, I don't see teams that are willing to test Jessie Bates. And that might be the only caveat. Jessie Bates might not see a lot of targets, but those are just the divisional games. If we look at the NFC as a landscape, yes, it is transitioning to a more pass-happy league. And when it all comes down to it, I think that in the grand scheme of things, if you're the Falcons, you're immediately chomping at the bit to get to where, like the Lions were last year, and become a team to be reckoned with. And in order to do that, on the defensive side of the ball, you have to rely on something that might not be relied upon, and that is your free safety. And when I think about why the position of free safety is so heavily scrutinized in the league, it's mainly because you can get so much work and so little work at the same time. It's not the sexiest position in the defense. It's not the most highly coveted position in the defense, but it is so important that you have a stellar one. And if I were a GM in the league or a fantasy manager, and I'm looking at free safeties, especially on teams who have opportunities, say like the Falcons, say like maybe the Chargers, I'm thinking about which one of their free safeties I most want in a one-on-one situation. And I think it's Jessie Bates. Now, like I said before, the caveat is that Jessie Bates might not be thrown to as often. It's going to come and go as the season progresses. But when I look at the NFC South, I don't think the NFC South is going to be entirely won on just grit alone. I think it's going to be won on defensive identity. Because a lot of what makes these teams so even stems from the fact that at every single level of their defensive structure and their offensive structure, some more than others, they cancel each other out. So if it's a three-way battle between the Saints, Bucks, and Falcons, it may come down to one individual player who makes the difference. In those interdivisional games, when you are trying to break down an opponent you're so familiar with, the NFC South more than anybody, because they know how even everything is. You know how tense every game between them is. It's going to come down to one player, potentially even one play. And when I look around that division, I look at all the defensive players in that division. I look at a guy like Cam Jordan up front for the Saints. I look at a guy, can't think of anyone in the Panthers, but let's look at the Bucks. I look at guys up front like Yaya Diaby, Vita Vea, Joe Tryon, Shoyinka. And I look at guys in the secondary for them, like Antoine Winfield Sr. So let's say it's down to the Falcons and Bucks. And they're playing. And it all comes down to one play. And it comes down to the difference in the defenses. A lot of people would take the rich talent that the Bucks have because they have all the players at every single level of the defense. But this is where the position of free safety has to come into play. Because in desperation mode, teams try to press you. Teams try to force things down the field. And it's highly integral that no matter what, the free safety is attuned to all of that. You can say that Antoine Winfield Jr. fits that mold. You can say that all the players on the Bucks can certainly do the job there. But when it's down to hard tacks and it's down to one specific player to make a play, to determine that division, to determine who is coming out on top amidst all this evenness, I'll pick Jessie Bates any day of the week just because of what he means to the Falcons. Without Jessie Bates, they don't really have anyone that I'm really threatened by in terms of who's the quarterback of that defense. Without him, they don't have any leader specifically in that back secondary. And so, when it all comes down to it, Jessie Bates is a player that you would want at IDP and that the Falcons love to have. And that's all I can say about that. But coming next, we're going to transition more to the front sevens. We'll be discussing a guy who's also underrated in terms of defensive ends. But maybe it's due to the physicality of how his defense plays. We'll be back to discuss that young man after the break.